Hello, 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 and welcome back to High on History. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Liz.
And this week, Liz has the Ishango bone. And I talked about that, fucking how many episodes? How many episodes? So those nights are rolling, apparently.
Oh my
language. And I know I touched about it briefly. I mean, I don't even remember where my notes are about the Ishango bone anymore. So, what is the Ishango bone again?
Okay, I actually don't want to start with the bone itself, and I'll tell you why, because there is much made of the Ishango bone itself, and I wanted to focus a little bit on the people and the village where it was found, and some of the other cool stuff about them.
Okay.
And then we will get to the Ishango bone, I promise. We're going to get there.
Cool.
I did find this. This is just a funny info bit. At one point I typed into the Google Ishango Village, and it didn't even, you know how it'll start giving you auto suggestions,
yeah.
Right? So it said Ishango Village, Thailand, Japan, China. It didn't even show me the Congo at first. And so this is going to come up again and again. There are a lot of root words in these African languages that also show up in Asian languages, and I think even in South American languages I was reading at some point.
Yeah.
So that is fascinating, and it just goes to show again how so much of what was happening in Africa all this time ago is also very much the cradle of, it shows up in these bits of humanity all over the world. So that was fun. So Ishango Village is nestled on the northwest edge of Lake Edwards. I'm sorry, Lake Edward. And I made that mistake in the Google, don't add the S. Lake Edward is in the northeast region of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, near the border of Rwanda.
Okay.
I heard the landscape described as each region more breathtaking than the next. And there is good reason for that. So not only is this village nestled on the edge of a beautiful lake, but there is savanna in this region. There is dense foresty areas in this region, and the hold on, let me get these names here. The Virunga and the Rwenzori mountain ranges.
Ooh.
Now these are equatorial mountain ranges, but they rise so high. They actually have glaciers on them. So these are rare, extremely rare, equatorial glacial mountains.
So you're telling me they've got snow on the top of these mountains?
Permafrost.
Perma-snow on these mountains.
Permafrost on these mountains, right. So they've got these mountains, and then they've also got these swampy, marshy lands, where you've got your... like I said, there's a lake there.
Yeah.
Now that lake is fed by two rivers. Let me get the... I'm sorry, it's 3 rivers, excuse me.
Okay.
So it's fed from 3 rivers, the Ishasha River, the Rutshuru River, and the Nantungwi River. And again, with the Ishasha and the Rutshuru, if I didn't know that those weren't Japanese words, I would have just assumed those were Japanese words, so I think that was kind of cool.
That is really cool.
And then Lake Edward itself feeds the Simlicki River.
Okay.
Now the Simlicki River, Lake Edward along with Lake Victoria and the Simlicki River, they feed the White Nile, which is... Before the Nile River becomes the Nile in Africa is one big river. It actually has 2 parts, and they come in different colors. I really failed to look up what the other color was, and I can't remember if it's blue, but I think it's blue.
Yeah,
anyway, so there's the White Nile,
and then the White Nile,
and then it meets the Blue Nile later.
Okay.
But this feeds the White Nile.
Okay.
So basically, it's a veritable Garden of Eden. Like if you could pick a spot and go right there, that's the Garden of Eden. I mean, this is definitely one of those places.
Yeah.
So we only know so much about the people who inhabited the village 20,000 years ago, and the reason for that is multifold. But number one, a volcano went off and completely wiped out all the inhabitants of the village. There are no living descendants of the people who inhabited Ishango 20,000 years ago.
Right.
They were all wiped out in this volcano.
Kind of like Pompeii.
Kind of like Pompeii. And like Pompeii, because it was a volcano that destroyed the village, it did leave a record, right? So it preserved this area.
Oh, cool.
Right. And that's because of the marshiness and the lakes and so on and so forth. It can be really hard to get good artifacts out of some of these areas. So it wasn't a good thing for the people of Ishango, but it's kind of a good thing for us now that that's how it went down, because we do have some record because of it. Incidentally, I could not get an exact verification. Every site I looked at said it was destroyed by a volcano. It was destroyed by a volcano. And when I tried to figure out which volcano went off 20,000 years ago that destroyed it, I couldn't find one. It just wouldn't specify, and I'm not a geologist. I don't necessarily know quite how to look, I guess. But the most likely culprit would be the Virunga volcano, in my opinion. It did go off 9,000 years ago, and it's kind of rocked and destroyed that region repeatedly, including, I think, fairly recently.
I think you said something about 2002 was one of the last eruptions, and I feel like I was checking out that volcano because you mentioned it, and I want to say I found stuff of it it's a fairly active.
It's a fairly active
activity for dating back hundreds of thousands of years.
Now, we do know a little bit about the people based on the tool record, because that's what we have left. We have their tools.
Yeah.
There's only so much you can glean or say for sure,
of course,
about a people by looking at their tools. But we know for a fact that their diet was incredibly varied. And we know that because they found the remains of several types of antelope. There was warthog. Let's see. They had there were remains from birds like ibis and pelicans. There were also lots of fish bones, and these bones showed marks of people eating them straight off the bone. So like they were cooking, like ribs. So they were cooking them. Yeah, no, they were cooking them, and they were like like they knew how to enjoy their food.
Okay. I mean, they were probably also trying to break into the bone for the marrow.
I mean, they could have been,
and they were good.
That, or maybe they're picking those bones very clean because they intend to use them. So, like, I don't know if you've ever eaten ribs, but, honestly, the best way to get that bone as clean as you're going to get it is to use your teeth, so that sort of makes all the sense in the world. They also found those, and I think we've mentioned these before, these barbed point bone points, right? And they've got barbs on them. They tend to be long, made of bone, and that was a technology that spread from Central Africa over time to everywhere.
You talking about the harpoons?
Among other things, yes, they used some of these as harpoons. And harpoons are different from spears in a pretty key way. So a spear, you throw it, and the whole shaft and the spear goes into the prey. Right?
Yeah.
And that's that. A harpoon will have a rope, a chain or a string attached to the head of the point. And when you throw it, it's designed so that the point sticks inside the animal. The shaft can break away, and then you've got a line on your prey. So, like, if you're a master fisherman, this is how, like, the fish will run, and it doesn't matter, you can just drag it back. Because you got this rope, and because it's got those barbs, it's...
Okay.
So it's going to stay in the prey, and you can drag it back. So that's what makes a harpoon different. And they had harpoons. Yeah, they found lots of harpoon heads. And that was a technology, it probably didn't start specifically in Ishango or even that region. But we do know that it started in Central Africa and over time spread across the entire continent.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I was super impressed. Like, I did not know what a harpoon was, honestly. I had no idea what made a harpoon.
That's really cool.
Specifically until I was reading about
They're
this.
filling in some gaps to, like, my story, too.
Oh, nice! Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I've had some questions about, like, where does this technology come from? But it's not in my region for the answer. So, actually, I'm really glad you're covering it here, because I was trying to figure out where our spear technology from the Central and the North came from. Because it really differed from the Masturian culture that I was talking about.
It is. It's
because
very
the
different
Masturian weapon technology, was for jabbing and thrusting and bracing it, where the Arturian culture was more for throwing their weapons. So I'm really glad you're actually covering this.
And I wonder if this has something to do, like, literally with the landscape and the type of prey that... Because here's another thing that I run across. So if you're talking about humans, and these may have been archaic humans, but if you're talking about humans 20,000 years ago, you've got the hunter-gatherer, and then generally there's this picture of nomadic or semi-nomadic. But the region right here where Ishango Village is so nice year-round, with so much prey, and so much, and the fishing is 24/7 awesome sauce, even to this day. So they weren't building permanent structures, it's true, but also... I'm not sure that they needed to move around a whole lot except to trade.
I wonder if the difference between the technology of the Mousterian and the Neanderthal for the thrusting purpose was because of the size of the prey. You're talking kind of small animals in comparison to the Neanderthals having to hunt the woolly rhino, the mammoth.
Right, so
we're talking creatures that are 22 tons.
These are very different kinds of prey. They move differently.
So, they would definitely need different
weapons. And this is one of the things that we talked about really early when we started this adventure, is how the technologies would separate and advance in their own spots, and then
come back together.
And then we'd share those advancements and create even more advancements. So this definitely kind of shows some of the progression of that. And here's another thing that I found wonderful and cool. Like, every time I've done one of these episodes, I've come across something that really stuck out to me as super cool, but was not necessarily the thing that everybody else was talking about.
Yeah.
And that happened here again, where, like, last week it was the complex adhesives. I was like, oh, yay! So this week, it's that they were making quartz points.
Oh.
And that is so significant because quartz does not nap well.
No, it doesn't.
It is as likely to just turn into pixie dust in your hand as do anything. So
Yeah.
it's not that they didn't have chert available. There was plenty of chert.
Yeah.
I looked it up. I wanted to make sure,
Yeah.
and there were chert points found. There were.
How about gray rack? I think it's called gray rack. I think that's how it's pronounced. I think.
I wasn't looking for it, so I didn't find it.
Gray, W-A-K-E, gray wake.
I wasn't looking for it, so I didn't find it. I did look to see if they had chert available, and they did.
Okay.
And lots of the points were made of chert. That was, and it makes sense because that is stone that when you go to nap it, it's gonna shave off exactly the way you want to.
Right.
Quartz, not so much. Yeah. So that kind of begs the question. Two questions really. How are they using it, and why quartz?
Yeah.
And as to the why, I mostly found speculation.
Right.
And not a lot of factual. So I do want to cover the three main speculations.
Okay.
But I should note that all of these are just what people said. Well, the last one is something I thought of, but the other two are things other people said. So one speculation that was floated as I researched was that the light-catching properties of quartz might have made the material seem alive or magical. And if it were held in some sort of spiritual regard, then a weapon made with such a stone might be thought to be imbued with sacred power of some kind, or...
Oh.
Right.
Okay, a cultural practice.
A cultural practice.
A spiritual cultural practice.
Now, I find that there's a tendency to mystify the ancient ancestors in ways that I'm not entirely sure are fair.
Right.
We don't know anything about their belief system. It seems more like we're putting something on them that might not,
Yeah.
So that is my hesitation with that particular speculation. I find we do a lot to mystify people when, in fact, everything that I'm seeing about prehistoric people shows them to be very intelligent and very pragmatic for the largest part. So the second speculation is the one that I think everybody that I talked to over the last 2 weeks said, well, what if they just did it because it was pretty? And there's definitely something to that. It's entirely possible that they did it because, not because it was easy, but because they liked it, because quartz is pretty. And we like pretty stuff. And do we go out of our way to do something harder just because it's more aesthetically pleasing? Going all the way back to Blomba's Cave? Yeah, absolutely we do.
Absolutely.
So we might have just done it purely for aesthetic reasons because, ooh, that looks cool.
Okay. I can believe that.
And then I had a speculation earlier in the week that I now doubt because you gave me information that I didn't have before. So that particular revelation threw my entire speculation kind of all the way sideways and sort of out the window. So I'm going to tell you guys what the speculation was because it was very cool, and then what you told me earlier today that I was like, oh, well, that's out the window. So my speculation was that the light-catching properties of quartz might have been thought by the hunters to dazzle or confuse the prey. Maybe it was not unlike the tassel at the end of those very cool Chinese swords, or, and then I thought too, since they were master fishermen, if some of those points were going in the water, it might have been specifically
Bait.
to catch the light or for bait of some kind.
The best way to catch a fish is with a shimmering lure.
So that was my initial assessment of the reason why they would use quartz and why they would go to the effort.
That's clever.
And then you said something today that kind of really puts a big ol' question mark, because you mentioned that in West Africa they were using those were mostly microlithic points, and I'm pretty sure that also in Ishango they were mostly microlithic points, and that they were sort of embedding them. And right away, the picture that you gave me, I am aware of an Aztec weapon where they used to take a stick and they would embed obsidian into it.
The weapon I saw, I didn't save the photo. I can find the photo again. The weapon I saw is exactly what you're describing.
It's so, and then because quartz shatters on impact the way it does, of course that would leave significant wounds. So then it's not about the light catching properties at all. It's about its shrapnel damage.
Leaving chunks of people. Yeah.
Or even prey. So that's a very, very different use, and then that would make its own sort of sense. And that struck me as soon as you said it as even more likely than what I thought was my highly pragmatic speculation. Anyway.
And that tool technology, I believe it's called bladette.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. Tune in next week. I'll talk about them more.
So, the region itself has been at least semi-continuously inhabited for a really long time. Just 6 kilometers away is the Katanda site.
Okay.
Now, it's dated to 90,000 years old.
Wow.
So, you can see this, around that lake edge, I'll bet that if we just did an excavation right around all those lakes, we would find a ton of stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
At various years and various spots in the
Absolutely.
So, and I guess that brings us to the discovery of the site itself and the discovery of the Ishango bone itself. And this is a really dark chapter that we have to cover. We actually have to move way forward in history to tell the incredibly dark story of the discovery of Ishango Village. So hold on to your boots, guys. This gets really rough, actually. So back in 1885, King Leopold II of Belgium orchestrated the colonization and occupation of the Congo. He retained full private control of the land as his personal property, and that included all the Congolese people who already lived there.
What?
Like his personal garden. You know, like a king's garden, only he had control of the entire Congo. As if it was his personal playground.
Wow.
Now, his interest was in rubber and ivory.
Oh, no.
And he worked the Congolese people to death. And it was far, far worse than that. He engaged it. There were impossible quotas. If you couldn't meet them, cut off the hands of your children and things of that nature. They kidnapped people and held them for hostage or ransom. They murdered millions. It was a Holocaust. And mutilated millions more.
Wow.
And enslaved the Congolese people, and it got so bad. Now, mind you, this is 1885 is when this starts. And it's not like people cared. It's not like the people in power in 1885 gave a damn what was happening in Africa. They did not.
Right.
But the atrocities there got so bad that there was actual international outcry about the way the Congolese people were being treated.
Wow.
And so in 1908, amid international public outcry, the government, the state of Belgium,
Yeah.
was forced to take control of the land.
Okay.
So it was no longer King Leopold's private property. Now it was the property, and as I say forced, as in, what, they couldn't just give it back? But,
yeah. Right.
but at that point, Belgium takes control.
Wow.
And you would hope that that was the end of the atrocities, but of course
not.
Of course it was not. Now, some of the very worst of the atrocities were at least slowed down or mitigated or put an end to.
Yeah.
Some of it.
Of course.
But, by and large, the people were still enslaved in their own land, worked to death. To death.
Yeah.
And their children were worked to death. All to produce rubber.
Yeah.
That went on until the Congo won its independence. I haven't looked any of the post-history.
Right.
But they did not win their independence until 1960.
Oh, wow.
And so in that time, for the last several hundred years, for most of recent Congolese history, they have suffered the worst atrocities known to man.
Wow. Well, that opened a whole rabbit hole there.
It really does. Now, the Ishango Village was discovered by a Belgian archaeologist.
Okay.
And this was interesting. I found only one mention of a specific year. I found
Oh, yeah.
oh, this was so frustrating. So if you type in when was the Ishango bone found, you're gonna get even academic sources with half of those saying 1960 and the other half of those saying 1950.
I was hoping I had a date, but I don't.
And I was watching something tangentially related to it, and somebody mentioned the year 1957 specifically.
Yeah.
And so I think that the year that the Ishango bone was discovered was 1957, but I could not, for the life of me, actually verify that.
Yeah.
What I do know is that it couldn't have been 1960. Because it was found when Belgium still had control of the country.
Right.
And along with all the other artifacts at Ishango Village, they were taken to... Oh, you know what? I don't think that
Belgium National Institute of Science.
Nice! Natural science.
Yeah, natural.
The Belgian Royal Institute of Natural Science. Now, they're still there, locked away in a drawer, under lock and key. You have to get special permission to see the Ishango bone or any of those artifacts. In 2022 or 23,
Yeah.
Belgium signed a largely symbolic diplomatic thing saying that they would release an inventory of the items that they have.
Fuck that. Sorry.
I looked at the number of the items that they had and the number that they said they were going to release. And I left the notebook with these actual notes in it. I had this written down, but it was not the total. It was nowhere near the total. It was like they were going to release like 83,000 but they actually have like 149,000 or something like that.
What?
Yeah, so
Wow.
it isn't even a full inventory, and it doesn't get released to the public. It's supposed to get released to special people in the Congolese government.
What?
So it's not even going to the academic sources. The Congolese Institute of I wanted to say natural sciences, but that's not it. But it was close.
I don't remember.
They have requested this stuff back, but no, basically, a few people in the Congolese government will be given a partial list of some of the artifacts that Belgium still has that they took from Africa and which do not belong to them.
Just give it back.
Yeah, we gotta start, all in the name of archaeology. Now, I understand there is some legal maneuvering on the part of Belgium so currently, these artifacts are the property of the federal government of Belgium. Because they are the property of the federal government of Belgium, so they say, ownership can't be transferred. And that's because the federal government in Belgium is like a public trust. Just like you can't sell BLM public land here in the U.S. to a private person, you can't just transfer what's in a public trust to a private entity without jumping through some hoops.
Okay.
That is part of the hang-up. The museum that has the artifacts themselves are part of the effort to get those items, or at least some of those items, returned.
Okay.
However, it's the same story every time. There's a bunch of bureaucracy, there's a bunch of red tape. Apparently we can do everything except actually return what we took that did not belong in the first place.
Wow.
And it's sad when your own scientists have to be in on the, hey, can we do this?
Something about it, yeah.
But that is happening.
Wow, okay, well, at least they're trying.
Some people are trying, and some people are not trying nearly hard enough, nearly fast enough, and just want to make gestures.
Yeah, right.
So, let's get to the icing on the cake, the Ishango bone itself. Now, you guys will have to forgive me. I'm going to go ahead and walk up to the camera. I want you guys to get a good look at this.
So, in my notes, and I know we discussed this, I remember mentioning now that it was possibly a math developing tool. They speculated a lunar calendar, a prime number counter, and a slide rule. And we both have kind of agreed that none of these theories are plausible.
And, I'm not sure about the slide. A bunch of them are not, and we're going to talk about it.
But yeah.
So here first, I just want to. I'm not good at this. Okay. Here we go. No, I am terrible at this. Okay. So that is what the Ishango bone actually looks like. So notice a couple of things about it. The first, it's about the size of a number 2 pencil. Actually, it's not very big.
10 centimeters is what I have.
Yep. And then you'll notice that there at the top, right there, that is a quartz point that's been set in that. And that's going to come up again in a minute. And then, of course, the thing that everybody's probably super looking at right there are all those notches. And those notches are, of course, part of the really important part.
A total of 168 notches?
I thought it was 148.
My note said 168. You were going to be right. My notes are probably wrong.
Hold on. I've got... One of these pages is going to actually show us the... Oh, You are correct. There's 168 etchings. They're ordered in 3 parallel columns along the length of the bone, each marking with a varying orientation and length. The first column, or central column, along the most curved side of the bone is referred to as the M column, from the French word milieu, or middle. The left and right columns are respectively referred to as G and D, gauche, left, and droite, right, in French. The parallel markings have led to various tantalizing hypotheses, such as the implement indicates an understanding of decimals or prime numbers. We're going to talk about why that's probably not the case. Though these propositions have been questioned, it is considered likely by many scholars that the tool was used for mathematical purposes, perhaps including simple mathematical procedures or to construct a numeral pattern. So one of these sides equals 48.
Yeah.
And then I guess this is where I got confused, because like it says 168 here, but oh right, because 120. Oh my god, I didn't math right. So 2 sides equal 60. I'm gonna bring this graphic up to you guys too.
Yeah.
These 2 sides equal 60, and one side equals 48, and I do find those numbers just all by themselves. Let's see if we can do this any better this time. Quite fascinating. Oh, it's gonna be like weird. So that's what it looks like. And you notice that those are kind of in really irregular groupings. So the truth is we don't know.
Yep.
Right? This to me appears like a way to calculate some kind of formula. And I don't think we would know without understanding. Right, so
I think it's a base 12 system.
It's clearly a base 12 system, at least in part. So the numbers on one side that equal 60, see, this is interesting too, because here's how we get to 60 on one of the sides. On the droit side, the right side, 9 plus 19 plus 21 plus 11.
Yeah.
And then on the other side that equals 60, it's 19 plus 17 plus 13 plus 11.
I wonder if it's because we don't have a 0 system, so it's a 1 through 9 system. I don't know.
Well, that would explain this here,
Yeah.
because that's a 1 plus 9.
Right.
There's no 0, you're right.
There's no 0 base system. We don't get the 0 until like 900 BC from Arabia.
Right. So, this is fun, and we do know that it was a calculator of some kind. The lunar calendar theory was based on etchings that were so small as to be microscopic.
Yeah.
And then the argument for it was that it would have only worked if you were, if it was location-based. And I'm thinking, you can't use a location-based device that has markings too small to see.
Right.
And I just, the more I looked at that entire theory, the more I found it unlikely. The quartz point that's at the top of the Ishango bone, that is kind of one of the also super fascinating things about it. Because I don't know if you noticed, but it does kind of look a little like a pencil. So they do think that that quartz point tip was for writing. So that makes me wonder if you were looking at it and you were like, you would know which side to use based on what you were doing, and maybe you were writing it down, so maybe it was a tool of trade or a tool of measuring something you needed to measure. I don't really know.
Right. Nobody really actually knows.
Nobody actually knows. And then I did find one other thing cute and fascinating about it.
Yeah.
And I don't want to make too big of a thing of this because I don't think, like, I would never draw a direct line between these two things. I don't believe there's a direct line to be drawn.
Yeah.
But, like, I'm looking at this thing, and I'm telling y'all, that looks like a wand to me.
Oh, yeah.
It does. It just does.
It does.
Like,
it reminds me of a spiritual wand. The number sequence, like, I like to study numerology. That number sequence is actually very numerical.
it is fascinating to me that, and when you think about it, so again, like, this is, I don't want to make too big of a point of it,
Right.
but if you have access to mathematics, that is magic.
Yes.
And here you have this wand, really, that is capable of doing magic. It can do math, and it can write, and it even looks like it even looks like a wand. But that is like the legit magic, right?
Yeah.
Mathematics and writing.
Yeah.
So I just kind of tripped on that this week because I found that a fun idea.
Huh. I like that idea. That is really cool.
So that, I think, is pretty much it. Thank you for joining us. This was Ishango Village 20,000 years ago. Next week we're moving back into Central Africa, yes?
Yeah.
West Africa.
Yeah, we will be in West Africa, specifically the central region of West Africa. We're going to discuss the ghost population that is found in 2 to 19% of modern DNA.
Ooh.
Or at least of African DNA. We are going to talk about the first genetic pygmy 60,000 years ago.
Fun.
We're going to also finally get into the discussion about the mitochondrial Eve.
Ooh.
And we will be talking about Y chromosome Adam.
Nice.
Finally. And then I've been building up for weeks about talking about Sri Lanka. And we're finally here to Sri Lanka. I won't be talking about Bantu yet, because Bantu language doesn't actually come around until 4,000 years.
Right.
But, I will finally actually be able to get to talk about the really cool cultural development that happened in Sri Lanka that I've been just so excited to talk about. And I'm also going to be finally talking about, like, all the different cave art periods.
Nice.
Yeah, we're finally getting into the actual cave art. I'm skipping 50,000 to 20,000 years because the Aturian people are pretty much all the same. I will kind of summarize all of that, of course, and kind of, like, connect it all.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah.
You mean the same as what you were discussing
in my last episodes. Yeah. So, yeah, that's what I'll be talking about. We're finally getting into West Africa.
West Africa is so
cool. So cool. I'm finding so much stuff, and I can't wait to talk about the Defano canoe.
Oh, you got the canoe! Yeah,
I got the canoe.
Yeah, I'm excited about that too because that is a very cool find. So yeah, join us next Friday for Jordan's episode as we continue our journey through majestic Africa.
Ooh.
And thanks so much for being here. Live long and prosper, everyone.
Bye.